Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL Scout and currently of Sports Info Solutions, joined here by Justin Stine, our fine producer, and the rest of the Sports Info Solutions Operations Department. And today we are here to talk about some things about a few different teams in the NFL that you might not realize, that people may not know unless you've been studying these teams super closely. And we're trying to bring that insight to you from the Sports Info Solutions experts right here. So first up, you might know him as our producer, but we know him as a real expert on football. And we are here to talk to Justin about the Los Angeles Rams. And we're going to ask the same question to each of the guys that come on today. We're going to start off with Justin here right off the bat. Justin, what is something about the Rams that's interesting that people don't realize or that people should be talking about more?
There's a lot of interesting things about the Rams. The most interesting thing for me as somebody who watches them, every snap, every week, is watching Aaron Donald play. He's really that good. And if you just hear about him or see the highlights, you don't really appreciate how great he actually is. He gets double teamed on, seems like every play, and still just – he's unblockable.
I mean, so I see it in the numbers. I look at the pressure rates amongst defensive tackles, and Aaron Donald just about doubles other defensive tackles, the next best guys in the league. That's unreal. We don't see that with a lot of different, you don't see the leading receiver with twice as many receiving yards as the next best guy. What is it about his game? What is it about what he does when you watch it on a play-in and play-out basis? I mean, he was playing next to Ndamukong Suh last year, a guy we think is a pretty good player in his own right. What's the difference that you see that he's bringing to the Rams on a snap-by-snap basis?
It's the explosion and the power and just the physical strength. He is the first person off on the snap, and even if you do get two guys on him, the combination of power and him just being stronger than everybody else out there makes it impossible to block him. He also has the short arms, which, was kind of a knock on him coming out of college. I think That's probably why he dropped a little bit. It's ended up kind of the way he plays. I think it kind of works to his benefit a little bit.
Interesting.
He can stay physical and stay short and really kind of shed those double team blocks.
Yeah, you don't see guys with 35-inch arms just getting stuck on Aaron Donald and him having an issue with it. Mm-hmm. You see him do a little shrug. You see him play the hand games and stuff like that. He's more about the quick movements than he is about really. He finds a way. If you want to keep him away from your body, he's going to find a way to get into you, and then it's over. For what like you're saying. Once he gets into you, you can forget about it. We had the Howard Mudd throwback podcast a couple of weeks ago. The old interview that Aaron did with Howard Mudd and Mudd famously talks about how he wants to short set everybody. He wants to get out there and be aggressive against somebody like Aaron Donald. It's just amazing because it seems like if you're playing against him, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, would you rather have a huge, a giant guy with all the strength in the world to try to handle him? No, because he's too quick. What if we go a little undersized and we try to short set him and do that kind of stuff? You're just going to get beat that much more quickly. So it's crazy what he brings to the table. Anything else that you wanted to bring into focus about the Rams?
Yeah, I think on the offensive side of the ball, I know a lot has been made about Sean McVay's offense and, his offensive genius and all that, especially leading into the Super Bowl, although it didn't manifest itself well in that game specifically. But, for some people who don't watch the Rams every day and just hear about McVay's offense, it really is something special. So in 2017, the Rams they ran 11 personnel 81% of the time, up from 56% of the time the previous year. Only one other team in the NFL ran 11 over 70% of the time, and that was Detroit with 72%. After the Rams had that success in 2018, so last season, the Rams were in 11 personnel 87% of the time, which is pretty crazy. But maybe more crazy is there were 14 teams in the NFL who ran 11 personnel over 70% last year, up from 2 or 1 the year before that. So obviously, you always hear it's a copycat league. Yeah, and that bared itself out. And, as the person who did the Rams participation, it's not just the 11 personnel, it's the tight splits. So they'll line up, all 3 receivers in the slot or tied up to the line, everything's really, it's kind of counter to what you see in college and kind of the spread concepts where you're trying to get as much space as possible. The Rams keep everything tight on the line for the most part. And after Cooper Kupp went down last year, it wasn't just 11 personnel. It was the same 3 receivers on almost every play for every game, which is even crazier that they're running the same. It's kind of the same concepts throughout the game, and they were still pretty much unstoppable all year. It was fascinating to watch. And like I said, doing the participation of trying to chart where the guys line up, it was shocking how difficult it was for people who were trying to chart the offensive pass. So trying to figure out where everybody was lined up, because it's just teams don't do that. So you could see, like, especially early in the year, our scouts who hadn't seen it were having some trouble with it. And then as the year went on and everybody started getting more comfortable with it,
and other people start copycatting it even more.
Exactly. Yeah. But it was just, it was just kind of different than anything anybody else was doing. So
awesome. I love that you bring that up. And that's my favorite thing about the Rams offense too. I don't think it's about their personnel group. I do think it's about the amount of outside zone that they run, and they keep hitting you with it, that same look over and over again. But then what they do from a formation standpoint, like you mentioned, where the spread offense, we try to spread out amongst the whole line of scrimmage and make all that space. The Rams are more concerned with where they can take space down the field vertically, and they don't need to widen you out at the line of scrimmage. They actually are constricting you in there to have guys in that it can be extra blockers like a Cooper Kupp, but then also you get the two-way go on the routes. We see the Vikings do it a lot too now with those kind of nasty splits, those tight slots with nobody outside of you. And then what that allows the Rams to do is they can really attack the field vertically, especially in between the hashes, where teams tend to be more dangerous throwing downfield than when they throw outside the hashes. And now all of a sudden you've got a few different things that are attacking you and coming at you in different directions. You have to really account for stopping the run, stopping the two-way go on these routes, and then accounting for the verticality going straight over the seam. So much for playing your base cover 3 against these sort of formations, because they're going to be lined up to attack exactly where you're most weak from the jump. So I love that you bring that up. The amount that they do that, I think, really would surprise people if they were more tapped into it. Justin, thank you for coming on. Thank you for blessing us with your voice, in addition to the fine mixing skills. And we will go around the office now, talk to a few of the other guys, and hear interesting things that they can tell us about the teams that they're experts on. Dan Foehrenbach, football operations coordinator here at SIS. I'm asking you the same question that I'm asking the other guys today. You are an expert on the Tennessee Titans. What is one thing that's interesting about the Titans that not enough people are realizing or should be talking about more?
Thanks, Matt, for having me on the podcast. As many Titans fans know, the topic of this offseason has been Marcus Mariota's future. Will he be able to perform at a high enough level to continue his career with the Titans? Will he be able to be healthy enough to play at least a full season for the first time in his career? Titans made a lot of offseason moves. They did really well in the draft. They signed guys like Adam Humphries, Roger Saffold, Cameron Wake, Ryan Tannehill, and then they made a big splash in the draft, drafted guys like A.J. Brown and a couple other players. Something interesting that people should take more note of is Adam Humphries' value. Adam Humphries, mostly known for being a slot receiver. According to our data, he ranked 5th among receivers who lined up primarily in the slot with a minimum of 25 targets in total points. This is right behind guys like Adam Thielen, Robert Woods, Keenan Allen, Juju Smith-Schuster. His value at slot, I think, is very underrated. Other Titans last season, Corey Davis, he ranked 28th in total points from the slot. Tajay Sharp ranked 54th from the slot. And Tywan Taylor, who they drafted a couple years ago, was ranked last among qualified receivers, having a negative total points value. I think Adam Humphries will be one of the key acquisitions that they made this past offseason, and I am very excited to see how him and Mariota work together this upcoming season.
You heard it here first. Adam Humphries has similar value to guys like Juju Smith-Schuster out of the slot, could solidify that position for the Titans and help make all those other receivers. Corey Davis, I imagine you see him spending more time on the outside, full-time player there, and you got to be excited about him. I remember coming out, he was one of my favorite route runners. I think we saw it all year last year, the type of stuff that he can do, kind of just breaking people at different times. More consistent catching the ball this year. Couple there with Adam Humphries. Just saved me the Ryan Tannehill, though.
Absolutely. I'm also excited to see A.J. Brown. He was one of the highly ranked receivers coming out of the draft this past season, rated high in our SIS football rookie handbook, so I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. Yeah, he's a big slot guy, too.
I can't remember, in the handbook, we had him at about, 30% of his snaps were from the slot last year, I believe. So it'll be interesting to see him. I think he's a guy that can play inside and outside for sure. So he and Corey Davis being more probably the outside guys, Adam Humphrey sliding into the slot, all of a sudden a formidable set of weapons. We'll see if Mariota can be the better for it.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Dan. John, Todd, one of our lead scouts inside the building. Thank you for coming back on the Off the Charts podcast.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
All right, we got to ask you about that Washington football team. What is something interesting about the Redskins that people should take more note of?
So for me, one of the more underrated, underappreciated players in the NFL is Ryan Kerrigan. He's been in the league for 8 years, and he's just been the picture of consistency from a durability and a production standpoint. But the reason is he's not flashy. So for durability, he started all 16 games every season since he got drafted in 2011.
Wow.
He didn't miss a single snap his rookie season. I remember he didn't miss one until late in his second season. He plays, shows up every Sunday, plays every snap, at least early in his career. He's been a leader by example on a team without much success or example to really follow. But he shows up every Sunday. So from the production side as well, he's sitting between Dexter Manley and Charles Mann, second all-time in sacks in the franchise. He's 7 away from becoming the franchise leader himself. His sack totals have risen steadily since his rookie year of 7.5. He's gone from there to topping out at 13.5. He's had 13 the past couple of years. So he's always sitting in that really good but not really 20-sack season elite level. The SIS Data Hub has him as 9th, 14th, and 8th in total pressures the past 3 seasons. And his play style and body type make him a stout run defender as well. So he's a total complete player. But all that being said, he's never really been heralded on a national level. He's made 4 Pro Bowls, but everybody does these days.
So Kerrigan, top 15 in pressures each of the last 3 years. Is that what you just said?
Last 3 years.
I don't think anybody would think that kind of off the top of their heads. We don't ever go through the list and say, Khalil Mack, Aaron Donald, Ryan Kerrigan. But and maybe we shouldn't put him in that sort of tier. But I think the next tier right below that, I think he's probably in that mix in a way that people might not realize.
Most of the guys that you see around him are your freak, flashy athletes, which is kind of what you see in your typical edge these days. He's a pretty rigid power rusher with a strong arm.
I think of arm length when I think of him.
Definitely. Some straight arms around the edge, win with power, win with effort, consistency, motor, all that kind of stuff.
Motor all day.
And so he's had bigger names opposite him like Brian Arakpo early in his career or nobody at all without team success. So he's really gone unheralded through his career, but he showed up each week and with some additions of Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Matt Ioannidis, the first-round rookie this year, Montez Sweat. If that front seven is going to be improved lately, they might get some more recognition, and so will he for sure.
Yeah, that could be really exciting, seeing how he performs. Maybe the pressure share, maybe the amount of pressures for the percentage of the team pressures goes down for Kerrigan, but maybe the way that front seven plays as a group, it really starts to become something that is more something to watch out for.
Yep, definitely. He's and teams in the division know it. Eagles fans in the office here always hate Ryan Kerrigan. They say he's got 3 sacks a game against him every time. So pockets of the nation know about him, but on a national scale, he's just been a consistent, hard-nosed player for 8 years.
One of the ultimate truisms in sports: if your division rivals hate you, you're doing something right. Thanks, John. All right, up next, we have Noah Gatsik. Noah, one of the strongest Philadelphia Eagles fans that you will ever find, a true Nick Foles truther. But we're going to let that one slide for right now and we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt of his insight. And Noah, tell me, what is one thing about the Eagles that not enough people realize that more people should be talking about?
So I think one thing that's really getting overlooked is Jordan Howard's impact in terms of pass protection. According to our data hub last year, Jordan Howard, among qualifying running backs, was the 3rd-ranked pass-blocking running back in terms of total points. He had only 2 blown blocks and over 80 pass protection attempts last year, which is pretty impressive. It's an element that the Eagles really were lacking last year. He's going to step in and be the best pass-protecting running back the Eagles have had under Doug Peterson. Howard will also be the power runner. Everyone knows that. However, the fact that he can stay on the field in these passing situations doesn't always mean that they're going to telegraph run when Jordan Howard's on the field, which I think was a false stigma around him last year.
Yeah, no, so that's interesting. What you just brought up right there reminds me of my old boss, Mike Lombardi. He would say running backs need to block, then they need to catch, and then they need to run. And having that guy that can block, what's remarkable isn't 2 blown blocks. That's normal for a running back. The remarkable is the number of pass blocking snaps that he had.
Right, yeah, over 80 attempts, only 2 blown blocks is pretty impressive. And I know they drafted Miles Sanders this year, and everyone should be excited about it, but the biggest hole in his game is pass protection. Right. And so I do think Jordan Howard's going to be able to stay on the field a lot more than people are anticipating. Not saying that, obviously Miles Sanders will have a role. The Eagles use running back by committee, but I think everyone is overlooking the fact what Howard will actually bring in terms of pass protection, and as well as, let's be honest, the Eagles' first, second, and third priority has to be protecting Carson Wentz and keeping him healthy throughout the season, and Jordan Howard is going to play a paramount role in accomplishing this.
I love it. It's really important when you have that running back on the field that you can't just tee off knowing that it's either going to be a handed off or play action, and there's nothing else that guy can do back there. Makes the offense more multiple, and I think you make a really good point about how that could fit in there. Love the way how he's done, just kind of finding these running backs to fit in there. True believer in the analytics movement there, showing it, putting his money where his mouth is by not putting his money where his running back is.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll follow Howie Roseman wherever he goes, but I do want to say this. Please pay Malcolm Jenkins. We need him.
Thanks. We'll keep that public service announcement. I know what Jen can bring to a team going back to when we were in New Orleans together. The ultimate leader, I don't know anybody that studies more film than Malcolm Jenkins. So I'm with you there. I can't argue against it. Thanks for coming on, Noah.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, John Shirley from our R&D department. You are a Packers fan extraordinaire representing your home state of Alaska. Wanted to ask you, like we're asking the other guys today, on the team that you're an expert on, the Packers, what is one thing about the Packers that's interesting that not enough people realize or that's interesting that you want them to know about?
Really underrated part of the Packers this year is their receivers group. A lot of Packers fans are kind of upset that they didn't draft a receiver or sign anybody to replace Randall Cobb. But it seems like they really like the young group that they drafted last year of Jamon Moore, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and St. Brown. They also have Jake Kumaro. There was a practice squad guy that's really made the team last year, and they expect some big things from this year. They also have Geronimo Allison, who was injured a lot of last year. Should be an injury risk moving forward, according to our injury expert, John Barros. But if he's healthy, he'll be a real big part of their offense as the number 2 receiver. And I think this is an underrated group because last year Rodgers I don't think really trusted them a lot. He had a lot of throwaways. A lot of pressures didn't result from a blown block.
Just because he's holding the ball too long, basically, right?
Yeah, he's holding the ball.
Nobody's open.
He didn't really have a lot of trust there, so he wasn't going to throw to a guy that might not have been really wide open like he would have Devontae Adams as their number 1 guy.
Right.
But according to our total points metric, over the last 3 seasons, receivers are actually the offensive position that improves the most from their rookie year to their second year. So I would expect a big jump from those 3 rookies from last year, and I would expect that group to actually be pretty solid, regardless that they lost Randall Cobb and didn't really add anybody new to the group.
Yeah, a couple of things that you make me think of. I think the Packers, we saw them kind of with their team building approach, look at kind of going small to big. They built up the secondary and the receivers with young guys and then started filling in from there. So they brought in the players actually last year. We might start to see some of those guys, the impact actually matter a little bit more because, as you say, the total points, which is measuring, not just what you do as a receiver in terms of yardage, which is as much the quarterback's responsibility, but figuring out how much the receivers are responsible for versus how much the quarterback's responsible for. You said that metric, you've done some research, and it really shows the big jump from year 1 to year 2 for receivers.
Yeah, they among the offensive positions, they have the largest jump.
That makes sense. We've always thought about that being a kind of longer learning curve position, no bigger change than from year 1 to year 2 as a receiver. And I think a kind of truism from when I was in scout circles that you would hear is it takes really 3 years for receivers to really get. And why does that happen? You spread offenses, it becomes even more of a crazy thing. Reading on the run's really hard as a receiver. It's not something that guys learn to do to read coverages a lot of the time. It's a work in progress when they get to the league. And then, of course, with all the different press that goes on and dealing with these athletes in the secondary, it is not easy to learn how to just get off the line of scrimmage on the NFL level. You made me think of my time in New Orleans with Drew Brees and just the relationship that he had with late round or undrafted guys like Marcus Colston and Lance Moore. These are guys that were not highly touted coming out, maybe lacked physical skills that some of these guys that Rodgers has been working on actually has. But for me, I think it's really important to have that ability to build that trust, to grow with the quarterback and the receiver. That relationship will certainly take 2 or 3 years before you really get to the point where you're seeing the same thing that the quarterback's seeing and making the moves automatically. So I'd be really interested in seeing that there. And I'm not betting against Aaron Rodgers. I've seen way too much stuff on Twitter lately where people have been just punishing Rodgers, saying, he hasn't performed well over the last 4 years. I think really looking at some basic stats that don't really tell the whole story. I think he's been on lesser offenses than he had been on earlier in his career, which is why he doesn't look like he's been as good a, adjusted net yards per attempt quarterback. But I do think that we can expect to see a rebound. I'd be betting on the rebound from Rodgers this year and the continued kind of progress as these guys age into an offense with him in a sustainable way, as opposed to being high-priced free agents that they just can't afford to keep.
Right. And I think a lot of that last year, in the last couple of years, is Rodgers has been hurt. Last year, they moved to more of a vertical offense. So he had to hold the ball even longer than he would. And then he add on top of that, didn't really trust the receivers as much. So I don't think last year is indicative of really what they can do as an offense moving forward.
All right, John Shirley, one of our best scouts here on charting the games on that side, and one of our up-and-coming research analysts over on the research side. There's nobody better to talk to if you're looking for some deep insight on the Packers. Thanks for coming through.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, that's our show for the day. I want to thank Justin, Dan, John, Todd, Noah, and John Shirley, all the guys for coming on today and offering their wisdom. Really interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Next week, we'll expect to have Aaron back, and we'll be back to our usual thing, breaking down the offseason and getting you all prepared for the Football Outsiders Almanac, which will be coming out soon. In the meantime, please make sure to subscribe, rate, review, tell your friends, let people know about the Off the Charts Football Podcast, and of course, check out Mark Simon's Sports Info Solutions Baseball Podcast, also available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Have a great week, and we'll be back in 7 days.